If you had perfect inner game, then anytime you saw an attractive woman, whether it's at a store, whether it's on the street, at a bar, anywhere, you would be able to approach her with complete confidence, no hesitation, and, shoot your shot. You would go for it. You would ask for her number, and you would know there's a chance you would get rejected, of course, but it wouldn't bother you. You wouldn't care. And, all right, you might think, well, I'm just not very good looking. I'd still constantly fail. But it's obviously more likely that you would have success if you did this, right? You might be skeptical, but most of you watching this barely approach any women, barely ask any women out. And if you had no hesitation whatsoever, and you always took the right action, your emotions never got in your way, your excuses, rationalizations never got in your way, there's definitely a good chance that you would have some success. It's a possibility. And you'd be shocked what would actually happen, because I know people like this. I know people who, even some of them are not very good looking. A couple of these guys are kind of autistic, but they have no fear of rejection whatsoever. So they'll approach any group, any scenario, and they'll always go for it. And they get a lot of results. Women respond to that. And also, it's just, then the numbers game starts to work for you instead of against you. And so that's the power of inner game. And that's why it's so important, because the majority of men, their inner game is kind of the opposite. They assume they'll just get rejected, that they'll feel bad afterward, that they won't be able to, like it's a petal off the rose of their soul, right? Like part of them dies every time they get rejected. They make it a big deal. They think it's going to be awkward and they're not going to have any success if they try. So why even bother? And then you end up like Clavicular, spending $30,000 or $100,000 on lengthening your legs. He's increasing his height even though he's already 6'2", because he's so obsessed with the surface level and, being insecure. So inner game is what will either create a self-fulfilling prophecy of infinite failure or infinite success. You'll either go on a downward spiral that just gets worse and worse and worse, or an upward spiral that gets better and better and better. And there are two keys I want to talk about in this video about how to change your mindset to improve your inner game. The first is inner game only matters if you put it into practice. I just want to put that out there. So if you're just reading books and watching videos, but you're not interacting with women, you're not going to actually improve your inner game. You can't just fix your inner game while avoiding facing your fears, because inner game comes from facing your fears. But with that said, there's something that you have to be aware of, which is developing inner game requires first that you realize the voice in your head is not logical. It is not really you. In fact, most of the time, in most cases, the voice in your head is just your emotions making you feel a certain way, and then you're rationalizing that emotion. So you see a hot girl, you want to approach her, but then you feel anxiety, you feel, oh, she'll probably reject me, you feel insecure. And so then the voice in your head rationalizes that feeling, oh, she would reject me anyway, why even try? I'm not good looking enough, I'm not 6'6", whatever. She looks bitchy, I'm not really, dating's not a thing for me right now anyway, I gotta focus on building myself up, whatever. You tell yourself these things and you think that that voice is real. You think that it's you, but it's not. It's just a voice that is rationalizing your emotions. So the more you can separate from that voice in your head, observe it, and realize that it's not always telling the truth, that it's not always logical, as much as it feels that it is, once you can disentangle from that voice, it will stop. Basically what it does is it creates a prison that you make and you lock yourself into. That's what that voice does. So being able to just frequently throughout the day, that voice in my head is saying this, but is it really true? Or am I just rationalizing? Is that my ego or is that logical? And the best way to develop this is meditation. Practicing mindfulness meditation. It's something I do often 30 minutes, an hour a day, because it has many benefits. But one of them is that it helps you distance yourself and become aware of that voice in your head instead of it being you. Instead of it basically taking the steering wheel and directing you where your emotions and your subconscious wants you to go, which is rarely going to be in your favor. It's going to be short-term thinking based on how you feel in the moment, avoiding fear, avoiding rejection, avoiding anxiety, avoiding challenge, staying in your comfort zone. That's what the voice generally does. So being able to distance yourself from it is very important. And just having the awareness that voice isn't always correct. And secondly, the process for improving your inner game, you have to reframe that anything that makes you stressed or anxious or uncomfortable, that those are signs, that feeling should actually excite you. Whenever you feel that, don't look at it as a bad thing. Look at it as a good thing, because that's how you know you're changing, right? If you're completely comfortable, that means you're on the same path you've been on and you're going to continue getting the same results you were. But whenever you do something that makes you uncomfortable that you wouldn't have done before, is how you start getting new results, right? So approaching women is going to make you uncomfortable at first. Escalating, taking the lead, whatever. These things will feel uncomfortable. That's not a bad thing. That's how you know you're on the right path. So you actually look for opportunities to make yourself uncomfortable in a way. And you realize that every time you do that, you become more resilient and your emotions will start to follow. So you take difficult actions and then your emotions will start to change. So you start to enjoy those things that were previously difficult. So the more you go out, the more you do something like approaching a girl, at first, really anxiety provoking. Over time, it becomes exciting. It becomes something that gets you in a flow state. But you have to be willing to do things, to do it when it's uncomfortable in the first place. So you have to understand that, and this is true for getting anything you want in life, you have to be willing to make a sacrifice, to make a trade. And there will be an initial pain period, but that's actually a good thing. There's a whole book called The Upside of Stress by psychologist Kelly McGonigal that talks about in detail why your mindset about stress, whether it's a good thing for you or a bad thing, will basically determine the quality of your life and the success you experience in a myriad of ways. So the narrative you tell yourself about what stress means will either cause you to avoid doing things that could lead to growth and that could lead to improvement. And those are the keys to make sure that your inner game leads you on an upward spiral instead of a downward spiral.